Good evening and welcome to the June 19th meeting of the Ann Arbor City Council. If you are able, please rise and join us for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk please call the roll of council?
Councilmember Kalasapathy?
Here.
Councilmember Frenzel? Councilmember Westfall?
Here.
Councilmember Lum?
Here.
Councilmember Grand?
Here.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Here.
Mayor Taylor?
Here.
Councilmember Eaton?
Here.
Councilmember Crapel? Councilmember Warpowski?
Here.
Councilmember Smith?
Present.
We have a quorum.
May I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda, moved by Councilmember Warpowski, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion of the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda is approved. Do we have any communications today from our city administrator?
We do, Mayor. Just a couple quick items. First, I'd like to begin by thanking Officer Jeff Schaefer for being with us this evening. A couple things. I've provided an update on the school zone safety projects to council, to school district, and I will post that and make it available to the public. That's an item of great interest. The changing driver behavior study has begun under the guidance of Dr. Ron Van Uten and his team from Western Michigan. And the impact of that will hopefully further also school zone safety. This evening, we have a presentation on a public e-comment tool, which Boji will give for us, which is a tool that will help our citizens participate in the public process without having to come down to City Hall. Police and Fire Open House is this Saturday, June 24th. Demonstrations of police repelling, firefighters cutting open cars, and the most important part, free hot dogs. Remind everyone that idling limits go into effect July 1st, and you can find more information at the city's website as well. So those are things that are going on. One thing I also want to mention is the new water utility payment process was launched without a lot of comments being received, which is always good when you launch a new system. So those are all things that are of interest to people here and the public as well.
Thank you. We now have a series of introductions. Our first is the demonstration of public e-comment tool for agenda items. Ms. Beaudry.
Hello. I'll just briefly, for council's information as well as the public, go over our new e-comment, which will be available with the July 3rd council meeting agenda. So this screen that you see is the typical agenda and minutes screen on the home page for Legistar, which you can access on the city's homepage, a2gov.org, by clicking on agendas and minutes on the democracy tab. So now what's new is you'll see over in the right corner, I've circled it in red, a button that says e-comment. So when you click on, it's a hyperlink, when you click on the e-comment button, and a pop-up window is going to open for the e-comment tool. There's a series of rules for the public. First of all, you must register. You see that it says sign in, and when you actually sign in, as I've done, your name will show up. Once a member of the public has registered once, they can just log in each time, but you cannot comment anonymously. So I'm logged in as myself. There's a number of rules for first-time users. One comment per agenda item, and once you comment, you cannot edit or remove your comment, and so there's no back and forth between comments. So it's one comment per item, one time. And if you think about it like the city council rules, it's a opportunity for folks not at the meeting to participate. So just like public comment, you would make your comment, but you would not expect staff or council to respond. So it's just a one-way street to provide council. It's another opportunity to provide your input. So those are the basic rules that will pop up when you get to the e-comment screen. And then if you scroll down on this pop-up box, you will see the various agenda items. In my sample here, I just have 2 things that I can comment on, and you can click on any one to make your comment. And when you go ahead and click, another box opens up. Looks similar to any online blog that you would comment on. My name is on there. One thing that's different than what you see on some, like if you think of MLive or something like that, you can actually click, it's optional, but I could simply click a button to say I'm opposed, I'm neutral, or I'm in support of this item. I can then type my comments, and I simply click the submit comment button to send my comment. And they are public, so you can view others' comments. You can see at the bottom of the screen that Josh from IT has commented already. So once I click submit, my item is public, it's on the web, and then at 4 p.m. on the night of council meetings, the city clerk's office will shut down e-comment for the night, and we can actually generate a report for mayor and council that will summarize the support, opposition, and also provide you with the individual comments as well, and that will be included in the council packet as part of the administrator's report. So that's the basic introduction. On the July 3rd council meeting, when the packet goes live on that Thursday, which I think is the 28th or 29th, e-comment will be available with that agenda.
July 28th.
Correct, yeah, the Thursday that the council packet normally is available. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And if I could add to that, the purpose is to provide additional ways for people to participate in local government. And since citizen public comment period at the beginning of a meeting is limited to 10 speakers, this also gives members of council the opportunity to get a broader cross-section of people who have an interest, and it just makes it easier for people to be active citizens. I do want to acknowledge the support of not only Jackie in the city clerk's office, but also our IT staff and Lisa Wandrash and the public information for that team to pull this together. It's a little bit ahead of the curve. It's not widely used, and so we're going to be a little bit of a test market for it. But I think in the end, it'll give the members of council greater opportunity to get a sense of how the public feels about different items.
Great. Thank you very much. We now have 2 introductions at the podium. Could I have first, please, the volunteers of the month?
Nice props.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Welcome again. So we are of course very fortunate in the city to have a tremendous staff. We have 740, 750 staff members, and they do such good work for us on a consistent basis. But nevertheless, we have a greater need than we have people to do it, and we are doubly fortunate, therefore, to have a citizenry, people who live in Ann Arbor who are delighted to pitch in. And one of the areas where people like best to pitch in, it seems, is our park system, because our park system is beautiful and warrants it. And people love it and they want to keep it that way. And so one thing that we like to do here at City Council is to honor some of the folks who have done more than their part to make our park system beautiful for all. And so today I'd like to make this proclamation in appreciation of Kevin Bonesack, Marguerite Dillard, and the regrettably absent Jeff Schramm. So please extend to him our thanks. Whereas Kevin Bonesack, Marguerite Dillard, and Jeff Schramm have dedicated themselves to the health and beautification of their respective parks through the Adopt a Park program. And whereas they have collaborated with the Adopt a Park program for many years to maintain play structures, plant trees and flowers, and advocate for park improvements. Whereas they have shared their neighborhood to advocate for and achieve shared goals in Glacier Highlands, Windermere, and Greenbrier Park. And whereas the City of Ann Arbor appreciates the tireless work of volunteers in assistance of our parks. Now, therefore, I, Christopher Taylor, Mayor of Ann Arbor, Michigan, in recognition of these personal and volunteer endeavors conducted to the greater good of our community, do hereby proclaim a commemoration of Kevin Bonesack, Marguerite Dillard, Jeff Schramm, and their fellow park neighbors on June 19, 2017, in the City of Ann Arbor. The floor is yours.
Mayor Taylor, City Council, thanks for this opportunity. We stand here as some volunteers, but we represent a lot of volunteers that have shown up for the past few years for the Adopt a Park program. When my wife and I moved into Northeast Ann Arbor, we'd been living there for a while, about a year. We looked at the park that was catty corner from our house. It's kind of dilapidated. What's going on with that park? We asked some neighbors, hey, why don't we have any new mulch or some other things? They said, well, the city's supposed to take care of that, but they're just not doing anything for that. Well, I just left active duty Air Force, and I know how to work a bureaucracy. So I called up City Hall and found out about the Adopt a Park program. So through the city and its parks program, we started to sign up for some different things and discovered that essentially we could be sponsored by the city with wonderful representatives from our own government to help spruce up a park. Some new mulch, like you said, some playground type updates, different things that we could do were all there. And that was stewardship, was ownership of our park. But we couldn't do it alone. We needed the service. And so we went around door to door saying, hey, can you help us out? Middle of May, we're going to do this thing. Can you show up? So that, along with some coffee and donuts, kind of helped. And so people showed up with their own wheelbarrows, some rakes, other things that were donated from NAP, to Natural Area Preservation, that had some tools for us. And we started fixing up our park, at least at Glacier Highlands. But it wasn't fully sustainable unless we started doing that every year, and we did. And every year, working with people like Melissa and Josh, who are here, right here in our crowd, they actually would go through with folks like myself to go around and look at our park and try to fix it up. But then we looked further, and we realized that in our park we had Windermere Park and also Greenbrier. So fortunately, leaders like Marguerite and Jeff, who's not here today, stepped up as well. And they showed a sustainable solution that we could all work together to fix up our parks. And so I'm just really happy to stand here today to basically tell all of you as city council members and mayor that we do have good people working in government to do good things. And all it takes is citizens to also take up their rakes or their paintbrushes to help out as well. And so that would be my charge, not only to council members, but really fellow citizens in Ann Arbor. If there's a park around that you think needs some improvement, step up to the plate and show leadership, because it's very possible to do that for yourselves as well. And what that does is that makes a beautiful community that we have in Ann Arbor. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you.
I represent Windermere Park and all of my neighbors who have helped out to come and volunteer. And I'm very thankful for this recognition on behalf of all the neighbors. And I look forward to continuing embellishing our parks together with all our neighbors, because it is possible.
Excellent. Thank you. Can I give you Jeff's? Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. Mr. Toy. Welcome. We are so fortunate in Ann Arbor to have a community that values truly everyone that lives here, everyone that comes here, everyone that works here, everyone that passes within our borders is welcome in Ann Arbor. And we are devoted to that. We have seen that through the course of our community, our various civil rights ordinances that we've had through time, our Human Rights Commission doing such tremendous work, and the tremendous and persistent and passionate advocacy for social improvement that we have demonstrated as a community time and time again. And our work is indeed not done. No one would suggest otherwise, but we are fortunate here today to be in a position to reflect upon some of the good things that have occurred during the course of our community. And today there is a special event, a special month, a special recognition that we are honoring, and that is, of course, TBLGQiPride Month. And we are here joined by a civil rights icon, a lion among us, Mr. Jim Toy. And I would like, therefore, to read the proclamation for Pride Month. In June of each year, the transgender, bisexual, lesbian, gay, queer, TBLGQ, and ally community celebrate Pride Month. June was chosen originally to commemorate the Stonewall riots that occurred in June of 1969. In April of 1970, Ann Arbor resident and local TBLGQ Jim Toy became the first publicly out gay man in the state of Michigan, and he has since worked tirelessly to create a safe and supportive community for future generations of gay and lesbian citizens. And whereas in 1971, Ann Arbor became home to the first university office in the world devoted to the concerns of sexual orientation, the Human Sexuality Office, now known as the University of Michigan Spectrum Center. And whereas in 1972, Ann Arbor adopted its first official Lesbian Gay Pride Week proclamation, the first such proclamation adopted by a governing body in the United States. Whereas in the early 1970s, Ann Arbor City Council members Nancy Weschler and Jerry DeGreich came out as a lesbian and gay man, making them the first openly TBLGQ public office holders in the United States. And whereas in 1974, Kathy Kazachenko, an Ann Arbor resident and University of Michigan student, became the first openly TBLGQ individual elected to hold public office anywhere in the United States, after winning a seat on the Ann Arbor City Council. Whereas, despite local non-discrimination protections, there remain no state or federal anti-discrimination laws to protect TBLGQ individuals from being fired, denied housing, or refused service. And whereas, in the wake of an increasingly polarized political climate and continued violence against TBLGQ individuals, especially those at the intersection of multiple oppressions, we must remain true to Ann Arbor values by striving to ensure that our city is an inclusive community where people of diverse sexual orientation and gender identity or expression are visible and live together in equality, respect, and happiness. Now, therefore, I, Christopher Taylor, Mayor of Ann Arbor, Michigan, do hereby proclaim June 2017 to be TBLGQ Pride Month in the city of Ann Arbor.
My brother Christopher, our mayor, distinguished members of City Council, and all the faithful staff members who serve the city and serve us all, and my comrades here who work together for justice, I am honored and humbled to be with you today when the city of Ann Arbor proclaims June 2017 as TBLGQ Pride Month. I appreciate the order of reference, and let me make a comment or two about icons. I was referred to as an icon by our mayor. First, icon you, you con me. Second, an icon is something you click your mouse on. So.
Perhaps we'll settle for inspiration then.
Thank you. As the mayor has said, in June of 1972, the Ann Arbor City Council proclaimed Gay Pride Week, the first such action by a municipal governing body in the United States. And in June of 1972, the city of Ann Arbor added sexual orientation to its city code as one of several classes protected from discrimination. And in 1999, the city of Ann Arbor officially included gender identity and gender expression in its non-discrimination policy. The city of Ann Arbor welcomes and supports and advocates for all whose human and civil rights are at risk. As I think back to my childhood, when I was a kid, I was told we don't discuss sex or politics or religion at the dinner table. So let's challenge that mantra. Sex and politics and religion are not separate concerns. They merge, they intertwine, they influence each other. They meld into sex, politics, religion. They're inseparable. If we bring up one, the others follow. We have the politics of sex. We have the sexuality of politics. We have the religion and politics and sexuality of football. So let's reframe that mantra of sex, politics, religion. Let's change it to the mantra of love, justice, faith. Love as tough love of ourselves and unbounded positive regard for others. Justice as support of human worth and dignity and advocacy for the human and civil rights of all. Faith as trust in our own basic goodness and the basic goodness of our sisters and brothers in the human family. Mr. Mayor, all my comrades, in this TBLGQiPride Month, I humbly thank you for your vision and your action in the service of love and justice and faith.
We now come to public comment reserve time. Public comment reserve time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment reserve time, one needs to have signed up in advance by contacting the city clerk. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. Speakers are not authorized to delegate their time to others. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council, we would be delighted to provide it to you. Our first speaker today is Kathy Griswold.
Good evening. I'm here to talk about the lack of transparency, which is an issue that is brought to my attention almost as often as overgrown vegetation. What I want to talk to you tonight about, though, is the problems that we have had with the police survey and the lack of transparency in that process. We're making improvements in pedestrian safety, and I went to the listening session last week at the Bryant Center because I wanted to just formally record the fact that A2 Safe Transport wanted greater police enforcement in the school walk zones. What I found was an extremely toxic process that is unbelievably troubling to me, given what's happening at the national level and in the world with our law enforcement and our citizens. And if you want more information about that meeting, there's an excellent article written by the Michigan Daily on it. I sat there frustrated and I thought, who politically benefits from the dysfunction that's being experienced this evening? The meeting environment was very tense, and the people there were extremely frustrated. The facilitator was defensive, and what was happening is she was speaking twice as long, answering a question as the person was asking the question. And I'd like to just give you 2 examples that I find appalling. One is the survey website. You can't go to A2 Police Survey and find it. You can't go to the city website and find it. You have to go to the consultant's website and get Ann Arbor. And I Googled A2 Ann Arbor Police Survey, and I got an MLive article that conveniently, if you call it that, listed the survey URL. That doesn't sound like we want people to take that survey. The other thing is it hasn't been translated into any other language. And so the lack of transparency came up many times that night. And I think that unlike the train station or development or basic infrastructure where we've grown used to the lack of transparency, this problem with a lack of transparency with this survey sets up false expectations, and it puts our police officers as well as our community members at greater risk. So I hope you address this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there communications from council? Councilmember Lum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just have a quick question for Mr. Lazarus. At our last meeting on June 5th, we had an agenda item on the train station. And as part of that item, you'll recall there was a proposed work plan and timetable that was included in your May 26th email to Ms. Hatcher at the FRA. That timetable had the FRA authorizing the release of the environmental assessment on June 16th or June 19th, so last Friday or today. So I'm ask that if you could, to please update us on the timing of the release of the EA. Is the release imminent? And if not, what timing we're looking at now? And what is the holdup? And also, if it looks like the EA release isn't imminent, how we're going to make that time up on the work plan? Thank you.
Councilmember Kalasapathy.
A response?
Thank you. For Ann Arbor District summer game players, the game code for tonight's meeting is call to order. I guess the camera is not focusing in on me.
There's no CTN.
Oh,
Oh, it's online. Oh.
oh, it will be, okay, all right. The code is call to order. That's all caps and no space between the three words call to and order. Again, the code is call to order. For those of you on Twitter, please resist tweeting out the game code. Thank you.
Further communication from Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I just wanted to brief council on the medical marijuana ordinance committee work. As you will recall, that the body was directed to present a recommendation to council by June 30th. That recommendation will be on our next agenda. One of the elements that will come with that is a recommendation to extend the committee so that it can continue to work with the Planning Commission to review the zoning ordinance considerations, being that those two things are very closely tied together. I just wanted to make sure this was on everybody's radar and to let you know that the committee had done their work, but we met on Thursday afternoon and didn't get everything together in time to make this agenda.
Further communication from council. I would like to request confirmation of the following appointment that was placed on the June 5th agenda to the Commission on Disability Issues, Patty Smith. May I have a motion, please? Moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Westfall. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That is approved. I would like to recommend the following nominations for your consideration. To the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority, Kyra Sims. To the Historic District Commission, Anna Epperson. To the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board, Anna Foster. To the Parks Advisory Commission, Robert Gallardi. We have now before us the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please, with respect to the consent agenda? Moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion of the consent agenda. Councilmember Lum.
Mr. Mayor, this is not about the consent agenda. I apologize. I had asked Mr. Lazarus a question, so I was hoping to get a response. about the EA.
Fair enough, my apologies.
Councilmember, I
me to
think the best way to address that is to send a written response back and make that response also public by posting it. I don't know that I'm prepared right now to give a detailed answer that would, I think, satisfy you.
Is it imminent?
No.
No? So you're not prepared to comment on the timing and what's causing the holdup?
I'd rather give you,
And the work plan?
I'd rather give you a more well-reasoned answer than one that I could do briefly right now.
Okay, well, I look forward to that response because we approved the proposed work plan and timetable was based on the release, Friday or today, so.
And I understand that, and I'm trying to be respectful to our state and federal partners in giving you a response as well as making sure that I have a chance to circle back with staff.
Did I, we now have before us the consent agenda. Did I get moving or second on that? Councilmember Lum, let's have Smith and Warpahowski, please. May I have discussion, please, of the consent agenda?
Just
Councilmember Lum.
no need to pull this out, but just a comment about the water main projects, CA 13 and 18. Those are the two water main replacement items. So these two were largely unanticipated replacement actions, and they, along with the other areas where we've seen water main issues lately, like at Plymouth and Grain, reinforce, I believe, that replacing our aging infrastructure needs to be a city priority. It may not be as exciting or glitzy as other stuff we'd like to do, but replacing water and sewer infrastructure and fixing the roads are mandatory, not discretionary. I also think these items raise the question of new developments and what impact they're having on the supporting infrastructure, whether it's water, sewer, and stormwater, roads and traffic. I ran into someone last week who does a lot of development projects in town, and this gentleman is also, from Ann Arbor, a local person, commented that, we haven't been doing much in the way of increasing capacity for stormwater infrastructure. And, of course, we do the footing drain disconnects and all of that, but apparently capacity building is viewed by some, obviously I'm not an expert, as also a concern, something that should be on our radar for the stormwater system. And I would add to this list parking capacity and questions about whether we need to be requiring more of new developments in terms of funding support for infrastructure. I think these are all questions that are worth exploring. Obviously, questions also for another day, but in my view, important questions we should be discussing. So that's just my brief comment about those replacement projects and the greater implications.
Further discussion of the consent agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The consent agenda is approved unanimously with 9 council members present, all voting in the affirmative, thus satisfying the 8-vote requirement with respect to CA1, CA5, CA6. That is all. Pardon me, CA7, thank you. Thank you. We now come to a series of public hearings. Public hearings are opportunities for members of the public to speak to council and the community about specific matters on the agenda. Speech at a public hearing must be in relation to the specific item of the agenda, the specific subject of the public hearing. To speak at a public hearing, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers will have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. Finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council, we will be delighted to provide it to you. Public hearing number 1, an ordinance to amend sections 9101, 9103, 9104, 9105, 9108, 9109, 9114, 9115, 9116, and 9118, and to delete section 9111 of Chapter 111, Fire Prevention of Title IX of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 2, an ordinance to amend Section 8525 of Chapter 105 Housing Code of Title 8 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 3, resolution to approve Holiday Inn Express and Suites Site Plan, 3853 Research Park Drive. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 4, resolution to approve the maxi annexation, .34 acres, 2955 and 2965 Kimberly Road. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 5, resolution to approve Circle K site plan, 1420 East Stadium Boulevard. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing?
Hi, my name is Edward Vilmetti. I live about 5 blocks away from this site plan, and my younger son routinely walks to this store to get candy, which I guess is okay. The plan has gone through a lot of process. It's gone through the Planning Commission, variances have been approved, and I'd like you to approve this plan as the best of a lot of alternatives that were put forward, and the best thing that could be hoped for under the circumstances. It's by no means perfect, but perfection is not what you get necessarily in an evolved process. What you get is the result of a neighborhood that was very diligent about a process that was going on literally in their backyard. A site that's very challenging because of the strange zoning on the site and the awkwardness of rezoning it to fit the purpose. And just generally testament to the ability of this citizen's process to this city's process to take something contentious and actually get something reasonable out of it. I understand there's concerns from the neighborhood of the actual building process that's going to go on to make sure that not only when the site is complete that it'll be in good shape, but also that during the building process itself, that people whose backyards abut the site will be adequately protected from noise and other sorts of things. But just in general, I'd like to see this go forward. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at this public hearing?
Good evening. My name is Lindsay McDivitt. I live at 1419 Iroquois Place, which directly borders on the Circle K gas station property. I've been involved in advocating for a neighborhood-friendly site plans for this planned rebuild since their first public meeting about 3 years ago. I'd like to state my clear opposition to the by right site plan presented last fall, and I'd like to support this alternative plan. It's vastly preferable to the by right site plan. It does improve pedestrian and bicycle safety somewhat at that busy intersection. It also protects a few of my Iroquois neighbors from the light and activity of the business. We all do appreciate the walls that Circle K plans to install rather than fences. However, I'd like to ask your assistance as I have a lot of questions regarding their installation. These include, what will the walls look like? Can the neighbors have input on the color? How will the removal of our existing fences be handled? How will our existing trees be protected? Can a major effort be made to keep most of the volunteer weedy trees now growing along the fence lines? Carrie Gray, the city forester, has indicated that's not a problem for the city, and it's been allowed in other gas station properties to provide light screening. Also, it would be hugely helpful if the walls could be installed prior to the major demolition and construction phases of the Circle K property. And once the business reopens, I also ask for your help in addressing the ongoing activity and noise that we neighbors close by will have to deal with the gas station open 24/7, much larger and busier than the current one, and directly adjacent to our backyards. Regarding noise, we greatly appreciate assurance that, as promised, we will not hear any ads, music, or any noise from the speakers at the pumps or any exterior space at the Circle K. I'd like to thank you all for passing the idling ordinance in Ann Arbor, and I'm hopeful that will be enforced at the Circle K. Lastly, regarding nuisance light, including lights in the pump canopy that's going to be new on the property, 14-foot high at its bottom. We sit 2 feet lower than the Circle K property, and I have continued concerns we will look directly at some of those light fixtures. But I'd like to thank you very, very much for your service to our city and for your attention to our concerns. Many of you have been really extremely involved over the past 3 years, and I and my neighbors are really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at this public hearing?
Hello. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather. My name is Jill Schloff. I reside at 1420 the Iroquois, which is directly behind the proposed new building. So our property line will be the closest to the building based on the variance they've requested. And I'm standing up here in front of you to endorse their proposed site plan, the alternate site plan. Pedestrian safety, we, as Councilwoman Grand knows very well, a lot of us walk to Burns Park every day, and that's been my main concern. And this is by far the best plan that we've seen as far as pedestrian and bicyclist safety. They've reduced the curbs from 4 to 2 on each side. They've put it to the best they could in the middle of the site. And I think going forward, this will be a good plan for both the neighbors and the pedestrians and the bicyclists. And I echo Lindsay's comments as far as our concerns, which Circle K has done their best to address, and I hope they'll continue to address further. The one thing that I do want to mention, in addition to the pedestrian safety, is, as I understand it, the city has control over what types of pads that you put under the trash dumpsters, because they regularly come by between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., and it's very loud, and for the neighbors around Circle K, that obviously wakes up our entire family, which is not all convenient. So, but as I understand it, the city is able to provide pads or mandate pads under the dumpsters. It's not something Circle K can do on their own. So I would request that if you do approve this plan, that you also include with that the requirement that there are these pads under the dumpsters such that it reduces the noise between the hours of, like I said, it can be anywhere from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m., typically on Monday and Wednesday during the week. So thank you. Again, I endorse their site plan. I appreciate how much they've done over the past 3 years, and I appreciate how much Council, Planning Commission, ZBA has done for this particular plan. So thank you, and hopefully you will move forward.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at this public hearing?
Good evening, members of council. My name is Scott Munzel with the law firm of Pear, Sperling, Egan, and Daniels. I'm here representing Circle K. Also, there's a couple members of the Circle K team here in case there are questions later on. I really just want to make 3 comments. First, after the Planning Commission recommended approval, 8-0, we went to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which approved several of the variances required. So the site plan that's before you tonight comes before you essentially meeting all the city rules and regulations. And so therefore, it's essentially entitled to approval. Secondly, the site plan is the result of a lot of work by Circle K, the neighbors, and city staff. The site does have some interesting challenges and conflicting demands on how to lay it out. There was a very lengthy process, and none of the configurations were really acceptable. Circle K went to like a matter of right type of site plan, which it was the result of all the various rules and regulations that would apply. And it was not a very satisfying site plan. So Circle K, with the discussion with the city staff, went back, asked the neighbors to come to yet more meetings. And there was a pretty thorough and vigorous dialogue about how to make this site work. Circle K appreciates the engagement of the neighbors, and their comments certainly helped make this a better site plan. And Circle K will continue to be engaged with the neighbors throughout the construction process to try to make the process go as smoothly as possible for them. Just the third comment, I do want to point out, Circle K is going to be putting in a masonry wall at the back, and they're going to be making it taller than what would otherwise be required. They did engage a sound study, and the results of that are that the sound leaving the site and affecting the neighbors should be lower after the site is reconstructed than what is currently coming across the property line. So we're pretty confident that it'll be an actual improvement for the neighbors. So those are my comments. We would hope that you would support the site plan that's before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. We have before us the regular session meeting minutes of June 5, 2017. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes? Moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Ackerman. Discussion of the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? They are approved. B1, an ordinance to amend sections 9101, 9103, 9104, 9105, 9108, 9109, 9114, 9115, 9116, and 9118, and to delete Section 9111 of Chapter 111, Fire Prevention, of Title IX of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Warpahowski, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion, please, of B1. Councilmember Lum.
No issues. I just appreciate that the fire chief and fire marshal are taking the time to clean up and update their ordinances and policies. So thanks.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? They are approved. It is approved, pardon me. B1, an ordinance to amend Section 8525 of Chapter 105 Housing Code of Title 8 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion, please, of B2. Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as a quick reminder, this change to the city code would mandate that landlords at the beginning of leases provide voter registration forms to their new tenants. This will help keep our voter rolls updated, but also at a time when voter access is being threatened in this state. Will make access to the polls a lot easier for the 58% of residents in this city who rent their housing. I'll leave it at that.
Further discussion? Councilmember Westfall.
I just want to thank the sponsors for pushing this forward. An initiative like this has been mentioned on and off for years, but as always, it takes leadership to pick up the flag and carry it across the finish line. So I'm really happy that this is coming for second reading, and I hope it passes.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. C1, an ordinance to amend Sections 8501 and 8511 and to repeal Sections 8522 and 8524 of Chapter 105 Housing Code of Title 8 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Westfall, seconded by Councilmember Grand. Discussion, please, of C1. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. C2, an ordinance to amend Sections 342, 343, 344, 345, 346, 347, 348, 3, and 350 of Chapter 41 Cemeteries of Title III of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Warpahowski, second by Councilmember Smith. Discussion, please, of C2. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. DC 1, resolution directing the city administrator to update and revive the City of Ann Arbor's Green Fleets policy, moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Warpahowski. Discussion, please, of DC 1. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. By way of introduction, this piece of legislation comes through the Energy Commission. As many of you will recall, the city did at one time have a green fleets policy looking at renewable resources to fuel our vehicles and what that meant. That was sort of went by the wayside several years ago. Part of it was because the technology changed very rapidly, and we just didn't keep up with it. The Energy Commission has been working on this, and following the energy efficiency resolution that we passed last month, thought it appropriate to, at this time, direct the city administrator to update the green fleets policy. And I would emphasize that this does not necessarily lock us into a particular technology, but directs the city administrator to essentially perform analyses on the types of vehicles we use and look at their carbon emissions and do cost-benefit analyses of these things. And then, ultimately, I would expect, and Mr. Lazarus can probably talk about it in greater detail, that as technology changes, this policy has to be able to adapt to changes in technology along the way. But this comes unanimously from the Energy Commission. I'm happy to co-sponsor and answer any questions that I can.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. DC 2, resolution committing the City of Ann Arbor to adopt, honor, and uphold Paris Climate Agreement goals, moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion, please, of DC 2. Councilmember Smith.
So we live in a crazy time, right? When Washington denies science and pulls us out of a global climate agreement as a nation. One of the most important things to come out of the Paris Climate Agreements is the realization that cities globally play the biggest role in reducing carbon emissions. Just because the administration in Washington is not interested in meeting the goals set forth in Paris does not mean that the city of Ann Arbor is interested in also shirking our responsibility in this. So this is a resolution reaffirming much of what you have said, Mayor Taylor, publicly, and simply putting into practice that we will continue to look within and without for funding to implement programs and policies that are designed to reduce our carbon footprint and our carbon emissions to meet the standards set up in the Paris Climate Agreements.
Further discussion? Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Smith, for doing the heavy lifting and the writing of this. I want to make it resoundingly clear that the U.S. President pulled out of the Paris Agreement, not the United States. And we are still, as a community, committed to living those values. The world came together and set a very simple goal to not increase global temperatures by more than 2 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial climate. It was a simple goal. It was a goal that was well-reasoned, and these aren't things that are respected by the current leadership in Washington, but need to be lived by local communities. And the United States, while only representing 5% of the world's population, is the number 2 contributor of carbon emissions on this planet. We don't have a second option. This is our home, this is our world, and we need to be doing everything we can to keep it so.
Further discussion?
I'm sorry, one other note.
My apologies.
The money isn't the only resource that the city needs to be contributing in this effort. We also have large tracts of public land, like our airport in our landfill that we need to be contributing to partnerships with institutions like DTE in order to push forward more renewable energy. We need to be throwing everything we can at this issue.
Further discussion? Councilmember Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I speak for many of my constituents in that we believe that climate change is the most important global issue of our era. Unfortunately, as has been pointed out, we find ourselves in a country and state that's actively working against our goals. I'm really proud of the work that our staff and many of our citizen volunteers are dedicating to the issue. But for us to really move the needle, it's abundantly clear we have to radically rethink the things that we do have control over if we want to keep, if we want to stay consistent with the Paris Agreement. When it comes to emissions per capita, a couple I can think of: housing supply near jobs, heavy rail transit, rules that mandate parking spaces. So, in short, we've got plenty of resolutions on the books, but we'll see if we have the resolve to make it work.
Further discussion? Councilmember Warpahowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. I'd like to thank the authors of the resolution as well. I also want to just point out how this resolution, to my mind, intersects with some of the other resolutions that are on the agenda tonight. CA 19 and DS, the staff resolution regarding this annual policy agenda. One of the pieces of our work to address the city's role of the Paris Accords will be to, in my mind, help reduce the barriers that individuals and businesses have to local generation of renewable energy. So when we get to our policy agenda further down, this is something that Councilmember Lum, Councilmember Smith, and I have worked with staff to put together. One of the items there is to work with the state legislature work with the state, whether through legislation or rulemaking, to eliminate the tax on residential solar arrays. I also tie in with CA 19 because one of our partners in that is GCSI, our lobbying firm in Lansing. So to Councilmember Westfall's call that we do more than it doesn't, I like that turn of phrase. We've got resolutions, do we have resolve? I absolutely agree. There's a lot more resolve we'll have to show, and particularly in the elements of land use and transportation as you described. But putting these other elements to help us affect the state policy and work through that is another piece of the puzzle.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. Resolution to approve the request from Racket Club for a new club liquor license to be held in conjunction with an outdoor service area located at 3010 Hickory Lane, DBA Racket Club of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Kalasapathy. Discussion, please, of DC3. Councilmember Lum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This agenda item comes from staff and the Liquor License Review Committee, and it is to approve a club liquor license for the Racket Club of Ann Arbor. As a member of the Racket Club, I'd like to recuse myself from voting on this agenda item, and I would step away from the table until the item is concluded. Thank you.
As is known, Councilmember Lum, Councilmember Grant, and myself are all Racket Club members. I think we can extend the request to council for authorization to stand down. Yes, may I have a motion, please? Councilman?
Your colleagues need to approve this.
Yes, exactly. I may have a motion, please, for standing down. Moved by Councilmember Eaton, seconded by Councilmember Warpahowski, who's dying to get in the chair. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We are standing down. Councilmember Warpahowski, you have the con.
Okay, thank you. We have before us the resolution that has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That was too short.
Thank you very much. DB1, resolution to approve Holiday Inn Express and Suites Site Plan, 3853 Research Park Drive, moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Eaton. Discussion, please, of DB1. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. DB2, resolution to approve the Maxi annexation, .34 acres, 2955 and 2965 Kimberly Road, moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Grand. Discussion, please, of DB2. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. DB3, resolution to approve Circle K site plan, 1420 East Stadium Boulevard, moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Eaton. Discussion, please, of DB3. Councilmember Eaton.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the neighborhood for its persistence over the last almost 3 years in working to ensure that this was a good project. If this project had been built according to the by right specifications, it would have been rather unattractive for the entire city. This is a busy intersection. We would have all suffered the consequences of the odd regulations for this kind of site. So the neighborhood really deserves our appreciation for sticking up for all of us. I also want to thank the developer because throughout this long period, they've worked closely with staff and with the neighborhood. And I don't think that anybody's 100% happy with the outcome, but it is a product of compromise, and I think that it's a project worth supporting, but it's especially a process worth supporting. All of the participants worked very, very hard on this. So if I may call the developer to the podium.
Hello, I'm Rihanna Zetkowski. I'm with Quattro Construction. We are the developer that have worked very closely with Circle K, Rich Lawrence, and the neighbors through numerous meetings at either city libraries or at the local Morgan and York coffee place, which is always yummy.
A wonderful place to hold a meeting. So the neighbors have expressed a desire to have the wall built before the construction on the actual building. Is that possible?
We are still working out the exact process, but we are confident that it should be possible. We are making sure of it before we promise anything, but we are going to attempt. There are certainly portions that should be able to go up prior to full construction and demolition of the existing building. Yeah, there are parts that we probably can do. I just don't know if we can do all of it at once. Because of the extensive trees, we are attempting to keep all the landscape, landmark trees that we are keeping on site, as well as just trying to minimize the total disruption that the construction will occur, but we're trying to minimize it.
And I appreciate that. I think that you've worked very well with the neighborhood, and I again want to say thank you. They also wondered whether you would continue to seek their input on the appearance of the wall.
Yes, as has been mentioned in some of our meetings, but not necessarily at the Planning Commission meeting or the ZBA meeting, there is a good selection of colors, and we are going to further contact them to have meetings as to what the wall color will be. I don't think we can necessarily change the color of each section, but we might be able to alter, when the wall changes height, as we know it's going from 10 feet to 8 feet and down to 4 feet where it's right next to a driveway along Stadium. We might be able to adjust the colors there. We just need to further, but we will talk with the neighbors about what colors is both agreeable to them and Circle K.
and I thank you. And I also want to point out that you did mention that you're going to try to preserve as many of the trees as possible.
Yes, as part of one of the many difficulties of the site, besides the zoning, there are a number of landmark trees on the site, and while we are mitigating a couple, just because there's a good 70-inch DBH, which is the height, the breadth of the tree at chest height, that's 70 inches, which means it goes out 70 feet for that root zone. We just can't accommodate that one and a couple of the others. But we are mitigating them per the code, as well as we are also mitigating an additional tree, which we are going to attempt to keep, but just in the thoughts of it is fairly close to where the new building is. We are mitigating it ahead of time. So we're going to try and keep it, but no promises on that one.
So again, thank you for everything.
Further discussion? Councilmember Ackerman.
Yeah, thank you. I want to echo the thanks to all the parties involved, from the residents who were incredibly diligent over this very long process, and had the patience to persevere through what ultimately was 3 site plan submissions, to the developer for being willing to submit all 3 and come to this hopefully final version, and to city staff for helping guide that public process of engaging the residents, but also helping steer the developer into a more favorable plan. I want to just quickly frame the conversations that happened at Planning Commission to discuss how we got to here, as a means of advocating for your vote in support of this, along with the neighbors who are asking for your support as well. I think the conversations really, when the by right proposal was submitted, I think the conversation focused in 2 specific areas. The first was mitigating light and sound and the conflicting use. It's a pretty abrupt change from a gas station to a single-family neighborhood, and trying to figure out the best way to blend those uses together. And the second is, of course, concerns around pedestrian safety and traffic flow. The by right proposal, I think, was threatening to both of those goals. And by working together, the developer and the neighbors and staff were able to realize what is a much better site plan. 8 pumps are consolidated into a canopy to the north of the property. It is a white light, which was a conversation topic throughout the public process. If there are still concerns about that light and any light pollution, I encourage folks to go out towards, to the Circle K on Michigan in order to see how channeled that light is and how screened it is by the canopy itself. This is the same number of pumps, but the building is increased in size by 70%, but is elongated and brought to the south of the property to help screen along with this wall, which will block sound and light and adjust to the changing grade on the property. This all fit into a bizarre context because of a deed restriction on the western portion of the property that prohibits any building from being constructed on a 33% of the property, which really makes it a difficult site to work with. In addition to that, all of this was I guess then moving to the pedestrian issues, when we looked at the by right site plan, the building being so immediately adjacent to Packard without any kind of embrace of the street front created a hazard from a visual perspective for drivers exiting the property, but also created a pretty abrasive street front. This proposed plan creates fairly narrow area that in which the store interacts with Packard, and the brick and stone masonry are welcome improvement over the current design, I think, aesthetically. Yeah, and all this accomplished through a series of variants and modifications, the 3 of which that I think are most important are the driveway widths, which allow us to reduce the number of curb cuts from 4 to 2, which is always great from a pedestrian perspective. The rear setback is at a lower than the standard minimum, but with the improved screening of the building itself and the wall, I think is for the better. And of course, as was mentioned, saving the older landmark trees to the south of the property, again, to screen, but also to honor the landscaping that was there before. So I encourage everyone to support this. It's been a very long process, and I think everyone would like to move on to the next stages of it.
Further discussion? Councilmember Grand?
Oh, thank you. I'll echo all the thanks to all the parties involved. One who's not here tonight, who's Councilmember Crapo, and I feel badly that he can't be here because I know he was really instrumental in bringing neighbors and staff and developers together. So thank you to him. I attended the first meeting 3 years ago, so have been involved on and off with the process, and although it's not technically in my ward, we are neighbors to the site right across the street. So I don't know that you as a developer can answer this question, but there was the issue about potentially violating our noise ordinances by coming in with loud trucks at 4 a.m. So I don't know if there's someone from staff who can answer that question, maybe, or if there are steps that we can take to mitigate that from happening.
I'm sorry, I didn't actually hear the question.
Oh, sorry, computer's blocking my mic. There were concerns expressed by the neighbors about loud trucks coming in at 4 a.m., between 4 and 6 a.m. Is there anything that can be done to mitigate that concern?
Well, I did hear from a staff point of view, from planning staff, no. We do have, we did hear about the dumpster mat that is available in some locations. That would have to be cleared with our solid waste staff to see if they would be accepting of that. That obviously reduces the noise when they put the dumpster down. It does not reduce the backing up noise. Anything else exceeding that noise would be probably subject to our noise ordinance enforced by the police.
And we have talked, we weren't aware of any activity prior to 6, but trash pickup should not be done before 6 a.m.
Yeah.
So we can look into enforcing the current regulations with the owner to make sure that doesn't take place before 6 a.m.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. I know we've had some issues with that, some residential trash pickup as well, and staff has been really helpful in addressing those concerns and speaking to the companies.
Yeah, I know people don't want to be seen as complainers or bother the police, but if they are able and they hear that activity taking place, it does help to call the police non-emergency number, which is available on the city's website and other places, and let them know that activity is taking place so we can keep a log of it, go over and talk to the owner and make sure that it doesn't continue.
I appreciate that, thank you. And I also just want to thank the developers and the residents and staff alike for making this a safer path to school and other places. It is a highly trafficked area in terms of pedestrians and cyclists. And not only to school, but the Dairy Queen is right across the street. So it's busy, and we appreciate your making it safer for everyone. Thank you.
Councilmember Love.
It's one of the reasons I drive by this site frequently. The Dairy Queen, sorry. But I too appreciate, minimizing the impacts, and I mean, there is a lot of pedestrian traffic in this area. So I too would like to just thank the developer and the neighbors for working together to find the best possible outcome, and I will certainly be supporting this tonight. As we've seen quite a few times recently, when there's non-single family residential that's immediately adjacent to single-family residential neighborhoods, development of the property can adversely impact the quality of life of those adjacent neighbors pretty significantly. And that's especially true when the developers are not willing to work with neighbors to mitigate the impacts. Fortunately, that's not the case here. By all accounts, from city staff and from the neighbors themselves, the developers worked very hard with staff and the neighbors to minimize the adverse impacts, including developing several alternative site plans. And that's really great to see, and does demonstrate that developers can get their projects done and minimize impacts if they're willing to work at it. So my thanks to the developer for doing this right and being a good neighbor. And my sincere thanks as well to the neighbors for approaching this with an understanding of the practical realities of the situation, for working in good faith within those constraints, and then acknowledging the developer's efforts, as you did again tonight. I also hope that the developer will accommodate the neighbors' wishes as best they can during construction, including getting that wall built. It's the first order of business if it's feasible and possible. And again, I'll be supporting this. Heartfelt thanks to everyone involved, neighbors, developer, and staff, for achieving what appears to be the best possible outcome in this redevelopment. So thank you all.
Councilmember Westfall.
Thank you. I was happy to vote to approve this variance at ZBA. I felt, there was a good discussion there, and, the community has asked, and council has acted years ago on rules that will eventually shift the character of these commercial corridors, which means bringing the buildings closer to the street and limiting driveways. So the reason I approved the variance wasn't for some of the fears about sight lines and pedestrian activity, because it's actually been shown that pedestrians feel a lot safer when the buildings are close to them and traffic speeds slow down and so on. But I think the reasons that this site warrants variances was, first of all, because it's quite a shallow site. Secondly, it's a filling station, so the use is, can be disruptive. It's bright, so the building in this case being, between the pumps and the residential is helpful. And also the fact that it's a single site. There isn't a row of commercial next to it, so to kind of force an urban design on a sort of a single site on this corner would be, potentially not as useful as it could be elsewhere. So I think it's a great compromise that the developers worked out with the neighbors, and I think it'll be a huge improvement to the site.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you. Just very briefly, it was referenced but not spoken to by Public Service. Mr. Hupy, if you're available, could you speak to the dumpster pads? As was alluded to by one of the neighbors as well as Mr. Delacourt, dumpster pads can be made available or allowed by solid waste.
I can't say yes or no. I am not aware of the dumpster pads.
Okay.
I don't think we have been using them. I don't know about Waste Management, what their practices are. In fact, I'm not sure which of the two services picked this up.
If, as this moves through permitting, that could be investigated and resolved?
Oh, clearly we'll
Okay.
investigate it. I'm just not going to be able to give you a resolution to that tonight.
Understood. I'll follow up. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilmember Warpahowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Just a quick question. We heard the discussion that there were promises that the noise from the external speakers wouldn't have advertisements or music, et cetera, affecting the neighborhood. Is there anything to that effect in the development agreement or anything to help put some teeth behind those promises?
There is actually no there's no recorded development agreement for this project. There's none required.
Okay.
So it's noted on the site plan, however, and again, subject to our noise ordinance.
Okay. Well, I think. Okay. So I can't say as the development agreement's going to be moved forward because there won't be one, but I will trust that if there are violations on this, the enforcement will be attentive. I think if we're talking about a amplified noise like this as opposed to discussion noise, other things that sometimes cause complaints, we'd have a clear line of action to make sure that the site stayed in compliance.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. DB4, resolution to approve bylaws of the Ann Arbor Transportation Commission, moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion of DB4. Councilmember Eaton.
Thank you. I just have a quick question, and I should have submitted this with my agenda questions, but this is for the city attorney. There's mention in the bylaws about regulating taxis and Uber and all of that. Hasn't the state preempted all our ability to do that?
I think that it's always subject to whatever preemption would be there, but to the extent that there are, my mic, to the extent that there are exceptions to the preemption, or I'm sure that will be looked at within the context of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. DS1, resolution to amend Ann Arbor City budget for fiscal year 2017, moved by Councilmember Westfall, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion of DS1. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved with 9 council members present, all voting in the affirmative, thus satisfying the 8-vote requirement. DS2, resolution to adopt the city's legislative policy agenda for fiscal year 2018, moved by Councilmember Warpahowski, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion of DS2. Councilmember Warpahowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. One of the things that City Administrator Howard Lazarus discussed after his arrival in town was to establish a city policy agenda that would help frame the actions of staff, our lobbyists, council members, as we look at state and federal opportunities and threats to the city's ability to get our work done, whether that's working on helping make sure there's clarity on issues such as local range of motion regarding affordable housing, funding for various city needs or others. Prior to Mr. Lazarus's arrival at the city, a lot of those motions had been sort of on an ad hoc basis. This process, Councilmember Lum, Councilmember Smith, and I worked together with Mr. Lazarus to put together what are the marching orders that we want our staff, through their professional associations and other contacts, our lobbyists, and to some degree ourselves, to be working forward at the state and federal level. There's a lot of really good stuff in here covering a wide range of city issues. 2 that I would just like to lift up that are particularly close to my heart. One, as discussed, is this issue on climate change. One of the challenges we've heard often we've all seen it in our inboxes, we've heard it from the podium, is the concern about the taxing of solar arrays. When somebody puts in a residential solar array and they see their tax bill go up. This is our understanding of what the state law requires us to do, and getting some clarity to allow an exemption or some way to avoid that tax hike for residential solar is one of the things that I'm hoping we'll be able to move forward on and potentially have some ability to find allies on both sides of the alley, from progressive communities, support for energy efficiency and local and renewable energy, and from conservative members of the state legislature or rulemaking bodies concerned about lowering taxes. Likewise, one of the big issues that I see the city facing is around affordable housing. We are challenged in our ability to find local solutions to affordable housing by state regulations that make it difficult to offer voluntary incentives for housing affordability. They are very difficult to enforce. So trying to find a state compromise that will give us that tool in the toolkit it wouldn't be a game changer, but it would make a lot of the other things that we're looking at in terms of housing affordability a lot easier. And again, it's something where at least as an initial step for my vision, having the voluntary nature of any developer incentive would potentially speak to conservative members of Congress, also speak to communities such as Traverse City and Grand Rapids that are experiencing housing challenges, as well as the goal of an inclusive community would speak to more liberal members of the Congress. These are just a few of the things that are in there. I want to thank again Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Lum, and Mr. Lazarus Mr. Postma as well, for a lot of work putting this together, and I hope it'll be a useful document in the year ahead to shape our work, and the practice of reviewing this annually will help keep us united in our work at the state, local, and federal levels on policy matters.
Further discussion? Councilmember Lum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a member of the Policy Agenda Committee, I also hope you can support this tonight, and would like to thank Councilmember Warpachowski for creating the committee in the first place and for his leadership. And thanks to Councilmember Smith and to Mr. Lazarus and Mr. Postma as well. To be honest, at first I was skeptical about whether we even needed a legislative policy agenda or committee to create it, but as the process played out, I've come to realize it is of value to take the time to articulate our agenda and our priorities in a structured way, and to have that on paper will not only be helpful for our lobbyists, GCSI, in advocating our positions, it also should be beneficial to staff and to the city's other partners. As you can see, the policy agenda has 4 sections related to an affordable and welcoming community, local and regional mobility, transportation, safety, sustainable, healthy environment, and providing open, transparent, effective, and financially sound local government. I certainly think that's a reasonable, effective way to structure the policy agenda, and the action items in each section are an appropriate mix of higher level strategic items and more specific actions and issues. So obviously I'll be supporting this tonight and hope you will as well. Thanks.
Further discussion? Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. This has actually been quite an enjoyable committee to serve on as we hash out a lot of these issues and direction. But what I really want to emphasize in my comments here is that you know, not only are we setting a legislative agenda for ourselves, but we're exerting our influence in a way that we haven't in the recent past, in a way that is more befitting a city of our stature within Michigan, and to help lead in a way that benefits our own community. I think that as we try to work towards many of these things, there will be many other communities across the state will benefit greatly from action on these things. And I'm just happy that we can take the steps to make some of these things happen.
Further discussion? Councilmember Westfall.
Thank you, and thanks to the committee for doing this work. I think it's really important to sharpen our focus on what could be, you know, a Moby Dick length, you know, wish list of changes at the state level. So, a couple of areas that I'm really glad have been highlighted in the land use and pedestrian safety arena. I just wanted to get some quick feedback if you can. So a municipality's ability to regulate motor vehicle speed, I guess, is one thing that I understand we've hit a bump in the road on here. And also with regard to land use, looking at regional planning, things like transfer of development rights, are those notions anything that has come across, or are they kind of for a later date or too far gone to hope for?
I think we've had some discussions about the ability to regulate vehicle speed. And some of those, we're actually at a point where I think at the next meeting of the committee, we'll address some things that we'll get some positive traction on with the state legislature. Land use issues are things that I think require further discussion for us. I think the benefit of this, though, is that there are a lot of targets of opportunity that come up. Councilmember Warpachowski talked about other communities in the state that have the same challenges we do, and it's really not a partisan issue. It is an economic issue, and we can take advantage of the fact that you can build a broader consensus on it, but I do think the areas of land use need to be discussed a little bit more deeply.
Councilor Lund?
Thank you. Just a comment in reaction to this issue of establishing speeds, speed limits. This particularly specifically relates to reducing speeds in school zones. And so this is one of the many items on the list of legislative issues that we would like to pursue. I would just like to note to all of you, this is established and regulated by the state. It's dependent on state legislation. But Mr. Lazarus has presented a proposal to the committee, which was then shared with the transportation, the Ann Arbor Public Schools Transportation Safety Committee. There wasn't really much discussion there about it in terms of getting their input, but anything like that is a policy recommendation that would not be made by this committee then to the folks in Lansing and elsewhere, but it would come here for the city council to make that recommendation, since you are the ones who set policy for the city. So, and of course, staff then implements that direction. So nothing will be going between this committee and Lansing. It'll be presented to council, including this issue of establishing and making recommendations to our state legislators about school zone speed limits. Does that help?
Councilmember Westfall?
Yes, and I appreciate that, and I'm glad that discussion is more fluid now. I guess I was more referring to a broader municipal ability to reduce auto speeds on everything but state roads within the community. So I guess it's, because my understanding is that that's what has hit some, the 85th percentile and such, our ability to flex those rules outside of school zones.
And as we continue to have the discussions, we bring it back through the committee. I think things that become part of the city's policy, certainly, council adopts and provides the policy. I think the benefit also, though, to the agenda is those things that are part of the council expressed outcomes for the budget cycle. As it's stated, there's a structured approach to approaching our elected officials at the state and federal level, as well as employing GCSI and the relationships we have through professional associations. So, I agree with Ms. Lum. Those things that are a matter of a hard, policy the council wants to pursue should come back here. And in that regard, addressing speed limits are something that at some point, if we want to change state statute, we'll have to come back and have a harder discussion.
Councilmember Warpahowski?
Thank you. And just to speak a little bit more specifically to that, the question of local control for speed limits was something we explicitly did discuss. There have been efforts to try to require that speeds be set by the 85th percentile. The current regulations, as we understood them, are that local governments still have the ability to set speed limits with a speed study, with a traffic study. And so for the purposes of the policy agenda committee at that time, we said, okay, we'll call that good enough for now. If the Transportation Commission or others has other ideas, we can pursue that. The other thing that was a very recurring theme in our conversations was the recognition that it is the position of the city of Ann Arbor that, as we understood and as I've understood, that we generally support local government having freedom of action, and we generally oppose state preemption. So whether we're talking about state preemption on gun regulations, on taxi cab regulations, whatever the regulations are, we've seen an effort in Lansing to strip away the ability of local government to make locally appropriate solutions. We've generally opposed that. So, to give a little bit of nuance, I think if we saw a revival of the effort to ban the use of traffic studies for setting speeds and require that everything be set by the 85th percentile, that would probably be something where we would weigh on again, given that this council has generally supported local latitude in policymaking.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. Do we have communications today from our city attorney?
No, Mayor.
We have before us the clerk's report of communications, petitions, and referrals. May I have a motion to approve? Please moved by Councilor Ackerman, seconded by Councilor Graham. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Clerk's report is approved. We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at public comment?
My name is Edward, still Edward Vilmetti, sorry. I'd like to speak regarding the city website and the city social media account, the city police social media account, and the efforts of contractors to communicate on behalf of the city. Specifically, this is regarding publicity and promotion of the Ann Arbor Police Survey. I was aware that there was a survey. I haven't taken it yet. I went to look for it, couldn't find it. So I started to look a little bit more. One of my neighbors had taken the survey and had sent me comments about it with a link to it, so I had the actual link from that. The person who sent it to me was not happy with the survey because she thought it was not a very well-written survey, but I just wanted to find the survey. So armed with the exact link to this, I started looking for evidence that the city had promoted this survey link anywhere on its city website. I looked at the police department page. There were 2 surveys there, neither of which were this survey. They were old surveys from years past, 2015. I searched the city website again and found one mention of it in a newsletter that had been sent out. This was like a PDF newsletter that went to all citizens, so I guess it went out in paper form. But it wasn't prominent even in that newsletter, and I had to search through the entire newsletter to confirm what I had seen from the web searching. I then went out more broadly onto social media, as people use Twitter, whatever, and tried to find evidence that either the police department had promoted it through the A2 police account, no sign of that, that the A2 Gov account managed by the city communications department had promoted it, no sign of that. And then a broader web search found some evidence that some student groups at the University of Michigan had promoted it, some at the Eastern Michigan University had promoted it, but there was no real sign that this $200,000 survey, which is, that's about $2 a person for the city, had gotten anything resembling a substantial amount of coverage to tell people that there was a survey and where to go to get it. I even looked at the contractor's website and couldn't find it there. So we've spent a bunch of money. Presumably not all the money has been spent yet. Let's spend some money and get some people to fill this thing out. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment?
Good evening, Kathy Griswold. First, I want to thank one of our city engineers. At a recent Ann Arbor Public Schools transportation safety meeting, we were sort of veering from proper process, and she pointed that out, and she stood her ground, and we will be a better, safer community for it. So I just want to acknowledge that work. The other thing I want to mention is that we talk a lot about how our president denies science. I think we're all in agreement about that. But what bothers me is our council also denies science, and I consider transportation engineering within the realm of science. And just a few examples of that. Transportation engineering focuses on uniformity. We've got the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. We've got the Michigan Uniform Traffic Code. Yet, In Ann Arbor, we want to be special and different, and we don't like uniformity. Sight distance, we know that we need to be able to see pedestrians, we need to be able to see around corners, but we have overgrown vegetation, and it doesn't much matter in Ann Arbor because we're unique. Crosswalks in the dark are a major problem for transportation engineers, but in Ann Arbor, I don't think we even know how many crosswalks we have that are in the dark, let alone have a plan to get them properly lit. The last thing is the DDA's project next to community high school, where within one block, we are putting in 3 mid-block crosswalks, 3 in a single block. And it's a one-way street. It's a major connector for north-south traffic. And instead of putting in a single crosswalk with an RRFB, which seems logical to me, but then again, I'm not a transportation engineer, we're putting in 3, and the place where I normally cross over to Carytown will not have one because I'm told there's turning traffic. So I think that we need to be just as passionate about focusing on science in Ann Arbor as we are about global warming or improving energy. So let's start looking at transportation engineering with that same passion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment? Seeing no one, public comment is closed. Are there communications from council? Do you have a closed session today, Mr. Postma?
No, we do not, unless you'd like one.
Perhaps another time. May I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Councilmember Westfall, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned.